and welcome to Biology Career Insights, the podcast where we talk with experts from the field of biology to gain valuable insights into the careers and explore ways to navigate the job market in this ever-evolving field. I'm your host, Dr. Manish Kumar. In today's episode, we are delighted to have Professor Milind Watve join us. Dr. Milind Watve is an independent researcher, science popularizer, and a man with a passion for finding innovative solutions to complex problems. Professor Watve has worked extensively in the field of evolutionary medicine, exploring new insights into communicable and non-communicable diseases such as diabetes, cancer, and old age infections. His research has been cited in leading journals, including Nature, Science, and Lancet. And he has published over 100 research papers and 9 books on science, education, and natural history. In addition to his scientific work, Dr. Watve is deeply invested in community building and has spent much of his career working alongside students, farmers, tribesmen, and patients to help them tackle their own problems with creativity and science. He has also made significant contributions to techno-entrepreneurship, holding patents and establishing novel business models. His innovative approach to healthcare has even led to the creation of a spin-off exercise clinic called BILD, which aims to help patients suffering from lifestyle disorders. For his contribution to science, Dr. Watve has received numerous awards and fellowships, including the G.S. Parke Industrial Merit Prize, the NCERT Award for the Best Educational Film, and the fellowships of the Indian Academy of Science and Indian National Science Academy. His recent recognition by the Society for Conservation Biology with the Distinguished Service Award for Asia further highlights his work on developing a community-operated model for mitigating farmer-wildlife conflict, which has the potential to revolutionize farmers' economics in India. Professor Watve, thank you so much for joining us today. And yeah, I'm really deeply obliged that you kind of took time and joined us.
Hello, and I'm glad to be with you.
Thank you.
And thanks for the invitation as well.
Thank you, Professor Watve. So to start with, we'll dive deep into this immediately. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and your current work, perhaps?
Yeah, my background has been a typical of science students 40 years ago. Okay. So at that time, well, the picture had changed a little bit, but not too much. That a student opting for science either would go for engineering or for medicine. Okay. And my mother was a practicing doctor, so she wanted me to opt for medicine, and I didn't know anything. Okay, there was no exposure. So I said, okay, I will try my best. Fortunately, it did not happen. Okay, fortunately, I did not get into medicine and continued doing science. Okay. Until then, I had no idea of career, no idea what happens. Somehow, during my master's, I got interested in teaching. So one of our professors gave me an opportunity to teach my junior classes. I enjoyed that tremendously. And then somehow that stuck. I thought that there is fun in teaching. There is fun in exploring science this way, in a classroom, in a lab, out in the field, and so on. So that caught on. Okay, and I decided that I should be teaching science, which came into reality. I have been teaching science for the last 42 years or even more. So I got into science teaching. I did not intend to get into research anytime. And I hardly did any quote-unquote research career. Okay. So because research career has become very stereotyped, you do a PhD, then 1 postdoc, then 2 postdocs, maybe 3 postdocs, then you apply for faculty positions. There is a narrow bottleneck, and if you happen to get through it, then you get into some, try to get some faculty position, then strive hard to get tenure or get whatever into associate professor, and so on. Okay. Then there is a big struggle to get funding. okay, and everything. I never got into this kind of race.
So it's a rabbit hole, that's correct. Like, everyone runs for the same race. So, but I think you distinguished yourself. You found your niche much before, so to say.
Yeah. So I started teaching. At that time, I hadn't done my PhD as well. Directly after my master's, I started teaching. And after 10 years of teaching, I thought that I was getting stagnated. I wanted to do something new. I wanted to go ahead. And at that time, again, I was not actually prepared to do a PhD. I just wanted to learn more. So I joined ISC, but there I happened to come out with a PhD. My PhD that time was a record time. In biological sciences, I finished in 3 years and 5 months, including coursework. Okay, so that happened to be a record time of
And
ISC.
which department was it, Professor Watve?
CES, Center for Ecological Sciences. And so there were 2 semesters of coursework, followed by 2 years of fieldwork. And then I came back with the data. In 8 months, I had analyzed the data, written the thesis, and submitted. Now, that was necessary for 2 reasons. Number one, I was not looking for any postdoc. I was already in a teaching job, and I was intended to go back, right? So there was a motivation to finish early and go back. My leave was also limited. See, mostly students want to go for a postdoc. So they want a few publications before you could apply for a postdoc. So you wait for that. Absolutely. So in a way, there is a tendency to draw your PhD longer. Okay, I didn't have that motivation. The motivation was to get a good shape to the work. Okay, do good analysis, complete the thesis. Actually, I published after finishing the thesis. But then I got a PNS paper out of my PhD, and another of my paper that was in current science was given coverage by Science.
Wow.
So I got a good publication, but I finished the thesis first, got the degree, and published after that. Okay. By the time I published, I was back in my teaching role, and I had started working again. But then that was with a difference. When I came back, I realized that research changes your mindset. Okay. And my teaching improved after doing my PhD. And then I started using research as a tool in teaching. Mostly people view BSc, MSc as a preparation towards research or preparation towards PhD. I started looking at it in an upside down fashion. I thought research is a good tool in teaching. Right? Of course, this research did not mean you do genomics or structural biology or something. But the moment you have your own question and you try to find an answer, find does not mean Google, but you try to seek an answer to that, your research begins. Okay, absolutely. So let undergrads ask their own questions, come up with their own curiosity, and we talk about it. Okay, we talk about it in a free way. That has nothing to do with your curriculum, that has nothing to do with your coursework. Okay, it is just out of curiosity that we come together, talk about so many questions and so many problems. Suddenly something appears where, oh, this is a simple experiment that is doable. And it might answer our question. Right? So this we started doing. There was nothing in hand. You can imagine an undergraduate college, an average undergraduate college in India has no, today actually it has improved substantially. Okay, at that time colleges had absolutely no infrastructure. But we started working out in the field. Computers had just come. Right? So we started using computer models, simulation models, things which don't need much money. Okay, but it needs thinking, it needs creativity. So that kind of stream started. And then in the next 10 years, our undergraduates started publishing papers in good journals. Right? So that became a model itself. And then I have followed this model throughout my life, although I changed my positions up and on, but this model continues.
Amazing, amazing. Professor Watve, I think our audience would also be interested in knowing, your like, your education, like your childhood education and stuff like that before, when did you realize that you wanted to, do teaching, like as a, as a youngster, perhaps? So perhaps you can highlight that. Yeah.
Well, in childhood, you had very strange things in mind, right? You want to become a railway engine driver,
Everything. Yeah.
or a pilot, or anything. Okay,
Yeah.
so that way, strange dreams were there. So I had a strange dream of becoming a sadhu or sannyasi and then roam over all the country. So of course, so out of all those mad things, then as I said, for some time, okay, I was in the stream of studying to getting into medicine, which did not happen. Okay,
Fortunately, yeah. As you always say.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. So teaching slowly started building up. Okay, so by the time I was,
you said that, one of your teachers actually gave you that, responsibility to teach your junior classes.
yes,
And this was
yes,
during your bachelor's or during your school
yeah,
times? Like when?
this was during my third year of bachelor's.
Okay.
Okay,
And this
I
was
taught a little bit of second year students, little
and this
bit of
was,
one course to second year students.
and Professor, where did you do your like bachelor's from? Like in Pune itself, or?
Yes, in Garavali College in Pune, Department of Microbiology.
Wonderful,
So,
wonderful.
so my parent subject was microbiology, BSc and MSc. Then for PhD, I shifted. My PhD is in wildlife. And although wildlife has been my passion right from school days, bird watching that time was sort of new. Today it has played around, and so many youngsters are doing exceedingly well. This generation of youngsters are much ahead of our generation in natural history, knowing birds, butterflies, snakes, reptiles, frogs. Okay, so, but that was just a beginning that time.
And was there a particular reason that you shifted your focus from, because you specialize in microbiology and then you shifted to wildlife? So was there a particular reason for it, or?
Well, a couple of things. Wildlife, as I said, has been my passion for a long time, right from school days. Right? The other is I had also realized the limitations of microbiology. Not that I was not taking it seriously. Before getting into PhD, I had a couple of patents in microbiology itself. Okay, and not only I filed a patent, it came into reality. A company was established based on what I did.
And this was during your masters. This was during your masters, right?
After my masters.
Okay.
Okay, after my masters, as I started teaching, So the curriculum was changing. New courses were introduced. And obviously, old and established teachers did not want to teach the new courses. Okay, so the new courses came to new teachers like me. And then when it came that, okay, I have to teach something which I never learned. Okay, I thought I must go and experience what I am teaching. So I started working in diagnostic labs that time. And as I started working in labs for experience, I also realized certain problems in the lab. Okay, and I thought that we should do something to ease the problems, remove the problems. For example, at that time, no path lab, no clinical microbiology lab was doing any anaerobic work because it is too tedious and too cumbersome. And so I developed a simple system so that even a small lab could cultivate anaerobic bacteria. Right? It was a small device, just this much of this small device, okay, in which you can do things anaerobic.
It's still quite innovative, I think.
Yes, yes. So with that, I filed a patent, and then I thought that some will pick it up. When one of my relatives asked me, "Why don't you market it yourself?" I said, "That's not my piece of cake." He said, "I will do it for you." So we launched a company. Okay, the company introduced this, then it expanded its product range. Okay, and we were the first. Later on, big companies picked it up, but we were the first ones to sell poured plates to path labs. Okay, before that, dehydrated media were there. Right? But we said that why not completely give the medium prepared and plates poured and sealed. Okay, so they just have to break the seal and use the plate. And so we introduced a number of things. So not that I was not successful in microbiology, but I realized that I won't have a very sophisticated lab for use. Okay, so there is a limit to which we can progress. On the other hand, the field is a huge lab which is available to you. Okay, there is no limit. You don't need any funding. You don't need any infrastructure for that. Field is an open lab.
Absolutely.
Okay? So getting out is the way where a resource poor person can still do good quality science. Okay, that's why I got attracted to two things simultaneously. One is field biology. The other is modeling, simulations, mathematical and statistical treatment of systems. The systems could be ecological, they could be physiological, they could be molecular, but modeling just needs a computer, your brain, and no real funding. So I got into these two fields, and that was the reason, and that is what I learned during my PhD. I interacted with the best modelers, okay, as well as I interacted with the best field workers in India.
Excellent. I think so. What I infer from this is that it was quite a strategic move, that, you considered your future and you consider, what could be done with the limited resources you have in your college. And that was, and you did a great job because, when I see your, say, publications, you have hundreds of publications and you had only, say, 8 or 9 PhD students. So, that's perhaps because of the strategic move that you took early in your career.
Yeah, so obviously there are these two kinds of, these two ways of thinking. One is you have already decided that this is my line of work, this is what I want to do. And then you think of what infrastructure do you need, what kind of funding do you need. I had an upside down thinking. This is what is available to me. Okay, now what best I can do, what best output I can give when what I have in hand is limited.
But this is so inspiring, Professor Watve, because, many people, the excuse is there that, hey, we have no funding, no infrastructure, so why I should bother, Yeah. But I think this journey of yours is quite inspiring to many people, even in remote areas of India, that they could always, come up with, where there is a will, there is a way. They could always come up with a way with, say, resource light environment, they could also pursue research. So I think that's...
See, not only that, there is a distinct advantage in being resource poor. Right? The advantage is that you are forced to think in a different way.
Yeah.
Right? And when you think in a different way, there is a good chance that you find something new.
Absolutely.
Let me give an example. In the 1990s, people realized that the bacteria that we know so far is a very small fraction of the bacterial diversity. Then people started talking about the uncultivable bacteria. Right? And realize that we have cultivated so far less than 1% of bacteria. The rest of the bacterial kingdom, we just don't have access. And then people started developing molecular methods to access these bacteria. Right? So then the metagenomics came, and then so many different techniques came. We didn't have any of that in hand. Right? So then we started asking the question, let us address the question, why is it that they don't grow on our plates? Okay, so let us try different methods of growing them. And then we could do that. Okay, so we could cultivate many of the previously uncultivable bacteria, and then also discover some of the phenomenon that bacteria do in nature, but which they don't do on our plates.
Wow.
For example, we could demonstrate that actinomycetes, which are the predominant antibiotic producers, actinomycetes are predatory in nature. Okay, when soluble nutrients are not available, they actually attack, kill, and eat other bacteria in the surroundings.
So they act as a, say, a bacteriophage, or,
So other than bacteriophage, as so they have Mycelia, and they have soluble antimicrobials. So they actually surround bacteria, secrete those antimicrobials as well as lytic enzymes digest the bacteria and absorb them.
Wow.
And we could entirely demonstrate this using microscopy. Okay. And we could also show at a later stage that some of the secondary metabolite genes are involved in this activity.
Amazing.
So this was possible only because we couldn't do what everyone else was doing. Right. So we were forced to take a different stand.
I think this is a great example of out of the box thinking. So that's,
yeah, of course, you need a little bit of luck. When you have a different way of thinking, you may or may not get something, right? But when you work on a dozen different problems, then you will get something new, at least in one or two of them.
Absolutely. And Professor Watve, moving further, perhaps, now that you are an independent researcher, perhaps could you highlight your current role and, what are your primary responsibilities now? Like what's your day-to-day like?
Yeah, so I don't have a lab anymore and I don't have funding anymore. By funding, I mean the conventional sources of funding are no more available to me. Well, I was never greatly funded anytime. Okay, but whatever was, even those channels are closed for me. But I realized a few things. Number one, as I said, the field is out there, which is an open lab, which remains the same. I also got involved not only with plants and birds and animals, I also got involved in people, okay, particularly people dependent on nature, like tribals and farmers and fishermen and so on, right? Because they also give you an open lab. You can work with them. There is tremendous amount of data totally untapped. Okay, so that is one. The other thing I realized is there is huge amount of data in the public domain now, right? Because of the change policies of journals, they ask you to make your raw data public. So there is huge amount of public domain data that has not been used. Okay, so we can use the data, ask new questions, make interpretations, and see whether the picture changes, right? So during the COVID time, we published 4 papers, right? 2 are published, 2 are not yet published, but 4 papers only based on the public domain data.
Wow.
Okay, now this data were available to everyone. The questions we asked were novel. Okay, that's why with the data that everyone had, we could publish something because we are asking new questions. We are tapping possibilities which others have not tapped.
And if I may, because I'm just very curious, so what are the current questions that you're asking and how does it, impact the broader scientific community or the broader public, if you can highlight some of these things?
Yeah, so I'll give a couple of examples. Okay. Both are huge problems. The problems are recognized. Not complete. One of them is not fully appreciated, but it's a big problem. The problem is as wildlife is catching up, okay, because in the 1970s, the Indian government established sanctuaries and declared its wildlife conservation policies and started implementing them. Not all threatened species have revived, but many of them have. Okay, so now the tiger population has improved. Most of the herbivore populations have improved. But now the reverse problem has begun. Right? Now the herbivores have become a big problem that make agriculture impossible.
Yeah.
Right? Farmers near sanctuary areas have a hell of life. Okay, because wild animals completely eat up their crop. They can't grow things. So this is a big problem. And you don't have to be near sanctuaries now. Now animals are moving out. Okay, and even in places where there is no forest, 100 square kilometers or 100 kilometers apart, there are wild boar. Okay, or there are nilgais, or there are black buck, and they come and eat up your crops. Right? It's not easy to keep them away. It's not easy to protect your crop. Now, there is a law that says that if this happens, if protected species of animals damage your crops, then the forest department should compensate. Okay, in some states it is the revenue department in competition. So the laws are state laws, so they are slightly different across states. But essentially, India has recognized this as a right of the farmer to get compensated if the protected species of animals or if near protected areas your crops get damaged. Okay. But this is only on paper. Nobody knows how to quantify damage, what should be the protocol, okay, how to give justice to farmers. Nobody has any idea about this. So I started working on that, made realistic measurements, started discussing with farmers, and it turned out that we were actually doing behavioral economics, having no background of that subject.
Wow.
Okay. During this and from this interaction, a game theory based new system evolved. And in this system, we could increase the farmers' agricultural productivity minimum 2.5 times. Okay, it's not a few percent, it is 2.5 fold that the agricultural productivity increased in spite of the presence of wild animals.
But Professor Watve, this is such a genius because, and do you collaborate with other specialists? Because, you are trained in a particular field and we all as researchers have our limitations, right? So kind of, navigating this new, say, for example, game theory and stuff like that, how do you kind of teach yourself? Like, do you collaborate or do you self-teach yourself about this new, new methodologies or new models and stuff like that?
Yeah, see, for the kind of background that I come from, it's extremely tough to collaborate. Okay, because science is highly hierarchical, right?
Unfortunately,
a science teacher coming to you and saying that I have an idea and I want your collaboration, nobody would entertain you. Right?
But this shouldn't be the case. I mean, this is one should be motivated by the idea of the person rather than, whether he's a teacher or an esteemed researcher at Harvard. I think
so. From human behavior point of view, what matters is from where the idea comes. If it comes from Harvard, then there were so many people who would be willing to collaborate. Okay? So that is the problem. But see, there are two ways of going about, and both are valid. I'm not saying that the traditional way is not right, it is right. So people do research based on expertise. Okay, based on the knowledge that you already have, okay, based on the expertise that you have or the other experts that are already there in the field. We go on the basis of ignorance. Okay, we start with saying that, oh, I know nothing of this field, right? But the advantage of ignorance is you start asking fundamental questions.
Absolutely.
Right? A person who has spent 10 years in a field has so many
biases.
Already perceived so many biases, so many prejudices, right? An ignorant person starts asking the most fundamental questions. And when you ask the most fundamental question, well, it is quite likely that someone has already answered the question. You look for literature and you find it, but it is very likely that nobody has even asked this question. Right? Absolutely. And there are so many examples in my life that when we ask fundamental questions, the question itself was new to science, new to any field. Right? And when you ask a new question, then you have something to contribute. Contributing a question is also a worth contribution. Right? And if you can come up with possible answers, if you can come up even with hypotheses that are testable, it's a contribution. Right? So we start with the background of ignorance. Right? I'm not an economist, but we did ask questions in economics. We also tried to find the answers. So I have published papers in economics, while economics is not my subject at all.
That's brilliant, And that brings to my next question, Professor Watve, that, I mean, apart from curiosity, that I think, of course, you are full of curiosity, what are the key skills and qualities that are required to be, say, a successful researcher and a professor, according to you? And how can a biology student, like a bachelor's who is actually studying on a bachelor's, master's, even PhD students, how can they develop these skills?
Yeah, it's too tough question. Okay, not very simple to answer. But I can say that you actually don't need a very high level of intelligence, right? You don't need to be very brilliant, right? You also don't need a very high, a huge knowledge background. What you need is to admit that I know nothing from this field. Let me make a beginning. Let me ask questions and let me try to go ahead. So very often, so one of our ways to think is not to read literature to begin with. Right now, that is what in all research methodologies you are told, that you first read the literature.
That's
The thing
very
is,
contrary to what what others say. Like others say
yes,
that begin with reading a lot of literature, but you are saying
yeah.
the opposite. Yeah.
So there are two problems when you start reading with literature. Okay, one is the literature is in a very uninteresting language. Okay, so a beginner finds it too tough to get interested by reading literature. That is number one. Number two, a more serious problem is that when you start reading what people have already said, your thinking gets into that channel, and then you fail to think of other possibilities. Right? When you start afresh, it is quite likely that you pick up a new line of thinking. And then if you feel that, oh, my line of thinking has some stuff, right? At that stage, you start reading literature. Right? So you have already developed an interest, right? So the badly written literature doesn't repel you from the subject, right? And you already have some idea which is developed to some extent. At the most, what will happen? You will realize that, oh, this idea is already there in literature. It is still useful because it reinforces that, oh, my way of thinking is correct. It is valid, right? On the other hand, if you find that this line of thinking is not there in literature, then you are contributing something new. Okay, so for my students, I never say start by reading the literature. I say start by developing ideas. Start by your own questions. Maybe some of these questions have already been asked or addressed or answered. But if you have 10 questions, I'm sure some of them will be new. If you have 10 ideas, I'm sure some of them will be new. And then start working on the new ideas.
So, I mean, what I could understand is that, Professor Watve, like one thing is, of course, asking a lot of fundamental questions and avoiding any, preconceived biases that may happen because of the literature or whatever. And third thing is to kind of come up with your own ideas to solve those questions that you have asked, right?
Yes.
So these are, these makes a lot of sense to me. And what are the other skills, like, when a student is learning, like, and he wants to become a researcher or professor, is there anything specific that you want them to focus on so that, they can become a better, say, at teaching, for example, or also in the research? Like, are there any specific skills they should focus on?
Yeah, I would rather say, what is it that they should not focus on too early? Okay, so they should not worry about their career too early. Okay, and I found that difference. I found that difference after joining ISER, because in ISER, students were exposed to career too early. Right? So by their second year itself, they were worrying about where to get admission for PhD. They were worrying about, oh, I should have 1 or 2 publications so that my admission is secure, and so on. On the other hand, when I was teaching in undergraduate college, students were quite raw. Right? So, oh, this question is interesting, and that's why they would like to work on it. Not because they are going to get a paper in their undergraduate years. Right? So, to start worrying about career too early is bad. Right? So let the students be driven by interest in a subject, by their own questions. Let them pursue things out of interest. At some level, you have to worry about career. There is no doubt. I'm going to make a statement which might be controversial for some people at least. But I've started saying this boldly now because, and then the statement is, doing good science and doing a successful research career are two different things. the skill sets needed for them are also not completely overlapping. Obviously, there will be some overlap, which I don't deny. But a career in science is rather too ritualistic, okay, and too channeled, right? So everyone has to do a PhD, then 1 year of one postdoc, two postdocs, maybe three postdocs. Then you start applying for faculty positions. And there is a very narrow bottleneck through which you have to go, where luck matters and so many other things matter, okay, and there is no guarantee, and so on. But why is it that the way for a research career is very channelized and so narrow? There should be so many different ways to pursue science.
Absolutely.
Right? In literature, for example, in literature, everyone doesn't have to write a novel. You can write short stories, you can write poetry, even haikus, which are three-liners, right? They also get respect in literature. Then why not in science? Why is it that everyone has to write a thesis? Even a two-page theorem can bring about a revolution in science.
Absolutely.
Right? So PhD is a ritual. Okay, postdoc is a ritual. But doing science should be free of all these rituals. Wherever you are, whatever job you are, you should be able to pursue science. You should be able to ask your own questions. You should be able to seek answers by doing either simple experiments or looking at data which is already there in the public domain. Right? Anyone can do this. So there should be several ways of pursuing research apart from this channel of PhD, postdoc, and so on.
And this is such a great point, Professor Watve. I think we all miss that in the race, that, you know, there were like some of the greatest scientists had no PhD or no postdocs. You know, it is only now that, you know, we have developed a narrow, as you said, a very narrow path towards becoming a researcher. But I think, you know, science as such, like, you know, fundamentally, it is open to anyone to explore science, right? And that is why you had, like, you know, the boson particle, Bose never had a PhD, right? And we have the God particle after him. So, I mean, this is fantastic. So, you know, with that, I think, you know, with the controversial statement that you made, I would also like to ask, you know, what are your current biggest challenges that you face as a, you know, as a researcher or an independent researcher, and how do you overcome them?
Yeah. So science publishing has become completely perverted. Okay, that is my another problem, right? So I certainly cannot, I have sufficient data, I have sufficient work to write papers, but I cannot afford author charges anywhere, right? Now, many of the leading journals have
humongous charges, and it's a huge business. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. So a person like me cannot afford that. Okay, that is one part of it. The other is that peer review quality has certainly deteriorated. This I have seen over my own 30, 40 years of experience, right? The kind of peer reviews that I got in the beginning of my career, 1990s, not that they have vanished, but they certainly have become rare. Okay, and recently I have received, and it's not only my experience, this is a wide experience, you get too many stupid comments in peer reviews. Right? So there is a sociology of science, there is a social structure of science, and science publishing goes more by the social structure rather than the quality of science. Right? It depends upon your connectivity, okay, your reputation, your lab reputation. It depends upon who is your mentor, okay, who are your co-authors, and this is not only anecdotal. People have shown with data that the peer review system is biased.
Broken, absolutely.
There have been dozens of studies and everyone has shown that there is a bias.
Yeah. I mean, there was something, you know, that was very funny related to this. Somebody has wrote, like, you know, very, like, full of crap, and there was in this some open access journal, and they just accepted it with peer review, you know, claim. So, I mean.
Yes. So I have been I'm a small man, so I know that nobody may listen to me, but I have been propagating this, that let the peer reviews be in the public domain. Okay, so any reviewer or any editor has to worry about their reputation.
Absolutely. Like more transparency.
If you write stupid reviews, people are going to read that. Okay, so you'll better be responsible in writing reviews. in making comments.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some journals have started experiencing some new system or alternative, but they are too few in number. Okay, but let us see how successful these experiments are. Let us see whether the system changes or not. Okay, but that has been another hurdle and a major hurdle in publishing out of the box things. See, because what happens is whenever there is a set line in which there are dozens of labs working, all these labs know each other, right? So even if suppose a journal does a double-blind peer review system, the moment you read a manuscript, you can guess from which lab it is, right? Now, such circles and such rackets make publishing easier. But if you have a new idea and you come up with something new and original, and you don't have, or you are not a part of that circle, then it is extremely tough to publish.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I mean, I can just think of, because you said the peer-reviewed system is broken, and totally agree that, because there was an article in Lancet, I think 3-4 years ago, that especially in the life sciences, 40 to 50% research is like non-producible. They tried it, but they were not reproducible. And there comes also the question of science misconduct, because, or because of the politics, or, because of this, the things that you mentioned getting involved. So perhaps few words also on that.
Yeah, so I don't know whether we are talking about the same paper, but if we are, then I will correct you. It is 70% that is not reproducible.
No, that's so true. Yeah, I think I was just being modest. Yeah,
It's
70%.
Yes. So reproducibility crisis has been there, and the major reason is the way we sort of evaluate science. Okay, now there is need to repeat someone else's work and see whether it is reproducible, see whether you get the same result. But this kind of work is unlikely to get in high impact journals. So nobody does that. Okay, so someone publishes something and it is either accepted uncritically or nobody looks at it. These are the only two responses. Right?
Yeah, the stakes are too high.
You have done something interesting, so let me repeat and see whether I get the same results. This kind of response is almost absent. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and this is mainly because of wrong incentives in science. Okay. So the academic system, the way we evaluate and the way we reward people is something that is
to be reviewed. I think
that is going wrong, right? So, and then this is not new. So many people have said this, so many people have criticized it, but there doesn't seem to be much attempt to change the system. Okay, that surprises me because, well, people have been talking about behavior-based policies, okay, or behavior-based system design. And there have been Nobel prizes in behavior-based economics and so on, right? But nobody is applying this to academics. Okay, your academic system should be behaviorally sound, which they are not. Now, I am a student of behavioral science, I did so many things in bird behavior, animal behavior, human behavior, and so on. So I have been toying with this idea that if I have to plan an academic system, which I'm not in a position to, but if I have to design an academic system, how can I make it behaviorally sound? Okay, the incentives are such that you will pursue honest science. Okay, scientific misconduct will come to a minimum because there is no reward for this. Is it possible to design such a system? Okay, whether it is implemented or not is an entirely different story. And I'm working on this. Okay, I did publish a couple of papers on this, and maybe this is something that is worth writing a book upon, which I don't know whether it's not a promise that I'm going to write a book. But
no, but I think this is quite needed, and I think a lot of researchers actually always build the cat as to kind of, they say that the PhD education is broken the system is
Yes.
broken, but nobody kind of, sees it from like, because for the first time I heard that, you are thinking in terms of behavioral science, that not to incentivize something that is not giving, ethical value,
Yes.
to science. So I think that that's a great point. Switching gears a bit, Professor Watve, how do you say, you said on the one hand that, you don't recommend students to read too much of literature in the beginning, but when it comes to you, like, you are an accomplished, say, researcher, how do you stay up to date with the latest, say, scientific research and development in your field? And what advice would you give to the students of biology, if they want to be if they want to be updated in, respective fields?
Yeah. So this hasn't remained difficult now. Okay. When I was a student, we had to go and sit in the library, and all that we had was biological abstracts and chemical abstracts. And okay. So today, internet has made it so easier that you actually don't have to pursue it. It comes to you. Okay. Even Google knows what your interests are. And if anything is published in that, then it will come to you. Or Twitter knows what is the range of interest, and then you will get notification that, oh, this is published. This might be of interest to you. Okay. Of course, you cannot completely rely on that, but substantial material comes to you on its own because of the artificial intelligence systems and so on. Right? Of course, you do have to search, but even those keyword searches have become easier now. So when you want literature on something, it has become simpler to do that, except for one thing, that is paywalls.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The articles behind paywalls. But you know that there are ways to get them. Whether they are legal or illegal, but there are ways to get.
There are ways, like, there are groups that kind of offer you, or you can
Yes.
always contact the author,
Right.
Yeah,
right.
request.
And then the other advantage I have is of being a teacher. Right. So my students are placed all the world over in
Absolutely.
every university. So if I want something from, let us say, from Harvard, then I can easily catch some student there who can get it downloaded and send it to me and so on. Right. So the thing is not getting literature on it. The thing is how to expand your areas, or how to catch the right question and the right kind of literature. And that happens by talking to people.
Interacting, yeah.
That can best happen to talking to people. There is somehow a kind of culture in some organizations, some institutes, and particularly mediocre universities and institutes. They feel that no, I shouldn't talk about my research until I publish it. Okay, so people try to hide their ideas, people try to hide their concept, or they don't talk about their experiments until they have published it and so on. This is bullshit. Okay.
Yeah.
So
and actually this is so true also for, premier institutes where they have a fear of getting scooped. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you.
Yeah. So whenever I think of an idea, the first thing I do is to talk about it to someone, right? Maybe a co-worker, other scientist, maybe a student, or whosoever, right? So I always keep on talking about ideas, and that grows, right? Maybe I failed to think of something which the other person can think of, right? So it complements me, it improves my thinking. So you go on talking about it, and that gives you more ideas, that gives you more perfection in your concepts. Okay, that gives you alternative views which you may have failed to think of. Right? So keep on talking about ideas is extremely important, and that really develops your way of thinking. And then on that line of thinking, getting literature hasn't remained a big problem.
Yeah, one thing that, I think you mentioned about like Twitter and other social media stuff. And here I have some concerns because I see especially young students, who are not exposed to, say, high level science. They easily become like they are the prey for the fake news, things. And there's a lot of fake science articles, that researchers at this university did that and this, that. And we could see that easily also during Corona, when people were like beating drums or thalis, and, and people were coming, and I saw like graduate students of science, physics students, they were like really believing that, the ultrasonic waves coming out of this thing will kill the viruses and stuff like that. So first of all, there's so much superstition, especially in countries like India. And second thing, with with so many fake news or even fake science journals, predatory journals, what advice would you give to the students in this context? How to kind of really filter between the real and the fake?
Yeah, so that takes us back to what I started with. Okay, I said that you should start asking your own questions, original questions, without believing in anything, right? And independent of whoever says this, right? Einstein can be wrong, Darwin can be wrong, anyone can be wrong, right? But let me challenge, okay? Let me cross-question. Maybe at times, after cross-questioning, I get satisfied that yes, their argument is correct, okay? But quite often you might feel that no, there is something wrong. I'm not yet fully satisfied. Let me think of it from that side, and so on, right? So that kind of questioning and discussing should be at the core. And if that is there, then automatically the pseudoscience will get weeded up. Because when you cross-question, it won't stand cross-questioning.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So that culture of cross-questioning is something that we need to develop right from school, right from undergrad stage. And a person who is tuned to cross-questioning won't believe in the fake news and pseudoscience things.
Yeah, I think I totally also like, here you have a great point that always question before forwarding anything on WhatsApp or anywhere. I mean, always ask whether this is true. And, you can verify this from so many sources.
Yes.
Yeah. So now, coming to the interesting section, like what are the most exciting developments, say, in your field right now? And what do you see the future of life sciences, especially in India and also like globally? Yeah.
Okay, the reason this question is very difficult is what is my field?
Your field, yeah, you dabbled in so many fields, but as you said, I think, from behavioral science to field, the field ecology and, all the things that you are currently doing. But you have a vast field, I must say, yes.
Yeah. So I would say that my field is the principles of science. Okay, and applying the principles of science to a wide variety of fields. So, for example, when we cross-question and re-examine the widely held belief that for diabetes, type 2 in particular, the entire treatment is focused on getting your glucose to normal. Right? We looked at so many clinical trials and original data, and we find no evidence that normalizing your glucose, you can avoid diabetic complications. Right? Normalizing glucose offers no clinical advantage in avoiding complications. Right? But this is
the common belief. Yeah, that is the wide belief.
That is a wide belief, but data doesn't show that. And nobody looks at original data. People only looks at what the pharma companies have been saying. And of course, they will always say what is for their profit.
There's an interest
here. Original data and the things. Look at original data and things appear very different. Right? So, what needs to happen is more people, including the non-academics, okay, educated but not non-academic people, need to cultivate the habit of looking at original data. Right? Today it has become possible because much of original data is in the public domain. Right? And if we can train teachers, okay, journalists, okay, other educated people that, okay, it is so easy to look at original data. So don't only believe what comes on Twitter. Look at original data. And then you will find that at least part of what has been said is not right. Okay, and this is actually based on data. So this kind of development needs to happen. And this is not going to happen through the channeled academics. because by doing this, you don't get high impact publications. So nobody will do that. But this is in the interest of public.
Absolutely.
Okay, in the interest of the society, that there should be people looking at the original data and making their own inferences.
And that's where I think, Professor Watve, also your important, one of your important interests is about citizen science. We didn't talk much about it in this episode, but I think, you have done a great piece of citizen science and educating the public in science. And, perhaps what you just mentioned also kind of goes on to, only say, help the citizens or the normal people, normal educated people address this question, So that's something that, one can Google about you, but you have been doing a lot of citizen science as well, perhaps
so
for the same reasons.
There have been so many organizations trying to popularize science. Okay, so for example, in my own city, there is a Marathi Vijnan Parishad, and which is very active. I'm sure that everywhere there will be some organizations trying to popularize science. Now, these organizations should go one step further. Okay, and rather than only telling people that this is what has been discovered, they tell people that, come on, let us look at data and let us ask our own questions. Okay, it's not too difficult.
Absolutely.
But this is what citizen scientists need to do, and that will help the public in a big
immense way. Yeah, totally agree. So finally, the last question, Professor Watve, what advice would you give to biology students who are, say, considering a career as a professor or a researcher? And what are some of the most important things they should keep in mind as they pursue this path?
Yeah, so the core thing is that there is this channel of research career, which is not bad, okay, which you can pursue, but there is a tight bottleneck. Okay, so not everyone is going to get through this. Not everyone is going to get a faculty position or a scientist position anywhere. But there are so many things that are open to you. Okay, getting into teaching at universities, at colleges, even at schools, getting into NGOs that work with people. Okay, you can address real problems of people. You can address problems of agriculture, problems of common resources, okay, problems of sustainability, ecology. There are so many things that you can work with people. And great science can be done using this. Right? So getting into teaching is one good option to do this. You can also be getting into services, getting into say IS and jobs like that. Working with people through various means. There are citizen science organizations. There are government departments which work with people. Okay, so getting into that, getting into industry and R&D, being an entrepreneur and do your own innovative solutions. So there are so many ways by which it is possible to pursue. Academia is only one of them, and it doesn't mean that if you don't get into academia, if you don't become a PI, the road is closed to you. The road is not at all closed. I often give a metaphor, and that is of a congested heart. Right? If an artery supplying to the heart muscles is blocked, it doesn't necessarily mean that it will lead to heart failure. There are collaterals, which means there are other capillaries and vessels developing which bypass the damaged or the blocked vessel and still continue the blood flow. Absolutely. Right? And these collaterals are extremely important for your heart. So similarly, there is one main channel of research career, but there are so many collaterals. So science should get flowing through these collaterals all the time. And alternative models of doing science are actually good for the mainstream as well. Okay, absolutely. So be open to alternatives. Science keeps on flowing. And even if there are problems in the mainstream, like there is scientific misconduct, there is reproducibility crisis, and there is peer review biases, and there are so many problems in the mainstream. But if you also keep on practicing alternative models, science will be benefited, and people pursuing those models will be benefited.
On that note, Professor Watve, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. It's been a pleasure talking to you. To our audience, thank you for tuning into Biology Career Insights. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to get the latest episode delivered straight to your device. See you next time. Bye. Yeah. Bye, Professor Watve.
Bye. And I enjoyed being with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.